Hey guys, tonight we follow the entire gloriously dusty life of someone who never makes the history books because he was too busy scrubbing camel spit off his sleeves. You're a Silk Road camel groomer, not a merchant, not a hero, not even an outlaw, just the quiet figure behind the beast that carried tea, silk, spices, and gossip across half the world. It's morning outside Merv, sometime in the 2nd century. You wake up not to birdsong or sunrise, but to the wet snort of a camel trying to chew its own rope. The air smells like wool, fermented barley, and something that might have once been milk. Your joints pop as you sit up, blanket full of straw, and brush a dried fig skin off your cheek. You grab your rough-handled brush made of goat bristles tied to driftwood and approach your first beast. Her name is Hura. She's older than your career and crankier than the tax collector's wife. You start with her eyelashes, because flies love her tear ducts, and a camel with an itchy eye is more dramatic than an opera singer on fire. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Hura moans a complaint, and you roll your eyes. Her breath hits you stale, with notes of wild onion and yesterday's cud. You check her hooves, which someone has wrapped with a charm, a tiny bundle of dried mint, crushed garnet, and a shred of copper, supposedly wards off blisters and highway spirits. Does it work? Well, historians still argue whether camel amulets were protection, status symbols, or just bored travelers trying out Pinterest 3 millennia early. You drag a leather bucket to the trough and fill it from the communal water pot yesterday. You found a beetle swimming laps in it, wearing what looked like a smug expression. The water's murky, and it smells faintly of sheep feet, but it'll do. Hurrah slurps it without manners. You whisper soothing things to her while brushing her coat, trying to get ahead of the morning inspection. Other grooms stagger out now. One sneezes violently into a saddle blanket. Someone's arguing over dates, fruit, not time. Always a debate about who ate what. The older grooms carry themselves like philosophers, but most of their wisdom revolves around saddle sores and who in the caravan farts loudest while asleep. A merchant walks past, humming a Sogdian tune. You nod respectfully. Merchants might act like princes, but without you, their camels would fall over in the first sand dune. You once tried to remind one of this. He gave you half a walnut and changed the subject. By mid-morning, the sun rises like a loaf of hot bread burning your neck, crisping the edge of your ears. The sand glints like it's got secrets. You cover your mouth with a rag, not for modesty, but to avoid inhaling someone else's breakfast fog. One of the younger camels, still not used to rope etiquette, tries to drag its tether across a brazier. You sprint and yank it away, just before it turns breakfast into barbecue. You pause to chew on a dried apricot you've been saving for days. It's hard as a bone but sweet. You let your eyes wander over the caravanserai wall's mud brick, fading with wind and camel breath, but standing, just like you. For now, somewhere behind the stables, a baby is crying. Someone's singing. Somewhere far beyond, a dust trail marks another caravan's arrival or a mirage that hasn't made up its mind yet. Later, a scribe with ink-stained hands passes by and squints at the camels. You overhear him mutter about distribution networks of camel-trafficked goods. You think about telling him you once saw a camel eat half a silk ledger by accident. You don't. You just pet Hura's flank and whisper, tell him about that distribution system. It's hard to describe the rhythm of your work to someone who's never strapped linen to a reluctant hump in 110-degree heat, but you get used to it. You start reading moods and nostril flares, knowing which camel kicks before it even shifts weight. You start trusting your hands more than your eyes. When you touch a coat, you know if it's too dry. When you smell breath, you can guess the diet. When a camel won't look at you well, you probably offended it. Somehow, 3 weeks ago, by sunset, you've watered 13 camels, brushed 7, unstuck a splinter the size of a dagger from one hoof, and replaced a broken rope with a spare, made from palm fibers and wishful thinking. You lie back in the dust near your beasts, using a saddlebag as a pillow. One camel snores, another mutters. Stars peek out like hesitant beads in a bowl of ink. The wind shifts. You smell cumin from the cook's fire. Your body aches in 10 places, but your soul feels oddly still. And just before you drift off, someone whispers nearby about a new road being built through the mountains, one that could cut travel time in half. You grunt. Not unless they teach the camels to fly. A pause. Then laughter. You smile. You wake up to a camel chewing your sleeve. Hurrah! Again. She yanks a thread loose with her big yellow teeth, then gives you a look like you left me tied up all night. You sleep-loving traitor. You sit up groggily, spitting dust from your mouth, and half a wonder if there's a secret camel union that votes on ways to sabotage your mornings. You start your day where all camel grooms do, with the saddles, not riding saddles. Those are for merchants and show-offs. These are cargo saddles, bulky wooden frames that rest like uneven tents over the two humps of your camel. And if you've ever tried balancing 400 pounds of dates, copper bowls, and fabric rolls between two sweaty mountains that occasionally fart directly in your direction, then you understand how much alignment matters. You lean your full weight into Hura's side to nudge the frame back into place. She belches. You try not to take it personally. The saddle rub has worn her skin raw again. You smear a mixture of sheep fat, juniper ash, and something that smells like regret over the inflamed patch. She flinches, then settles. It's not perfect, but it's better. Camels are petty creatures. One crooked load, one time one. And they will never forget. They'll stop walking in protest 5 weeks later in a totally different town. Or they'll give you the spit. Not just any spit. Mind you, the full, slow drip, throat-gurgling, soul-piercing herk P-A-W at that says, you know what you did. That morning, you're adjusting the saddle on a younger male named Tufan when he groans dramatically and slumps to the side, flinging your pack onto the ground. You stare at him. He stares back, wide-eyed. As if you drop the bundle, you sigh. Tufan, like all juvenile camels, believes every inconvenience is a moral injury. The caravan's readying for departure. You watch merchants tighten ropes, check ledgers, mutter about stolen figs. One's arguing about exchange rates between silk bolts and turmeric sacks. Another's trying to haggle down the price of a jade figurine that may or may not be cursed. Meanwhile, you're still fiddling with Tufan's lopsided saddle. A groom next to you, Bahram older, with a beard that could house birds, leans over and mutters, your boy's testing you. You give in now. He'll sit down in the pass and weep. You nod. He's right. You yank the strap hard and fast, jerking the saddle tight with a sudden clack. Tufan screams in camel. You don't flinch. Bahram chuckles. Told you. By now, the sun's high enough to make the saddle irons sizzle. You adjust your head wrap and soak a rag in leftover water, tucking it into your shirt to cool your spine. It lasts maybe 10 minutes. A heat shimmer lifts from the sand, bending the horizon like an overcooked bowl of rice. One of the merchant's sons, skin pale from reading scrolls indoors, asks you how long until they reach Samarkand. You squint. 4 days if nobody drops a wheel. 5 if Tufan remembers this morning. The boy blinks. Remembers what? Exactly. The weight loads shift again. Your hands are raw. You have no gloves. Nobody does. There's an old saying among grooms. If your palms aren't cracked, your camels aren't packed. There's a brief break before departure, and you collapse under the shadow of a fig cart. You suck the juice from a preserved plum and watch someone chase a goat across the courtyard. The goat wins. As usual, a healer walks by offering ointment for cracked skin allegedly made from deer marrow, sesame, and crushed pearls. You suspect it's mostly sheep fat and crushed egos, but it does smell nice. That afternoon, a brief sandstorm sweeps through. Not the big kind that eats caravans whole, just a small, obnoxious one. It rolls in like a drunk uncle and coats everyone in grit before vanishing. You spend 20 minutes picking gravel out of a camel's nostrils while it moans like it's the one doing you a favor. Historians still argue whether these mid-route grooming rituals had any spiritual significance or were just practical chores that took on mythical flavor over time. Some grooms used to chant while brushing soft, rhythmic humming. Others swore by silence, claiming words unsettled the beasts. You mutter threats, compliments, and the occasional love song. Camels don't care, but you feel better. By sunset, the caravan is lined up 60 camels long, stretching like a spine across the sand. You walk beside them, checking buckles, nudging noses away from stray snacks. A merchant slips you a tiny pouch of dried melon in thanks. You smile and pocket it. The little moments matter. That night, you sleep under a patchy tarp with 3 other grooms. One snores like an angry god. Another talks in his sleep, mostly apologies. The third keeps a dagger tucked into his boot in case of sand bandits or emotional surprises. He says, you close your eyes. The camels grunt softly nearby. The wind dies down, but somewhere in the darkness, you hear a distant thump, a saddle slipping. You sit up with a groan. Tufan. Again, Tufan has managed to wedge his saddle halfway down his flank, looking both smug and confused. An impressive emotional range for a creature with permanent eyeliner and a chewing problem. You approach slowly, hands raised, like you're calming a spooked diplomat. He chews, loudly, on what may be your rag. Really, you whisper. We're doing this at midnight. He huffs through his nostrils, sounding like a broken kettle. You pat his neck and begin loosening the straps. He shifts his weight with excruciating slowness, as if to say this is your punishment for rushing the morning buckle. You fix the saddle with practiced hands, securing the understrap twice as tight as usual. There, revenge. Groom style. It won't hurt, but he'll feel it. Just enough to remind him who's in charge. For now, by dawn, the camp is groaning awake. Someone burns millet again. The smoke clings to your eyes like regret. You stagger to the water barrels and splash your face, catching your reflection in the ripples. Dust-streaked, sun-pinked, and frowning. Perfect. It's going to be a long day, and you know it. The moment Farid and Hakan, the rival grooms from the Bactrian side, lock eyes across the clearing. They've been feuding for weeks. Their camels, predictably, hate each other. And now, the beasts are tethered near one another because the caravan leader wants symmetry in the morning formation. You barely finish brushing Hura's tail when it starts. A wet slap, like someone flinging porridge against a tent, then yelling, then spit, everywhere. Tufan joins in, possibly without knowing why. Camels are team players like that. By the time you rush over, there's a full-blown spitting war in progress. Green ropes of foam arc through the morning light. One glob lands on your forehead. You blink slowly. This is your life. You help pull the beasts apart, stepping between them like a referee in a very smelly boxing match. Someone throws a fig. Someone else ducks behind a cart. A merchant shouts, "I just bought that blanket." Eventually, it calms. The camels are separated. Farid and Hakan are both scolded by the caravan master, who suggests they resolve their issues like grown men or just stop being idiots. You rinse your face with wine, not to drink, just to erase the memory. As you coil a rope for the 4th time that hour, you can't help but reflect on the absurd diplomacy required in camel grooming. These animals hold grudges like ancient kings. They can recognize faces after months apart. They choose favorites. They ignore apologies. And worst of all, they bond. You remember once tying 2 young camels together for mutual support on a desert climb? They bonded so hard they refused to sleep apart for the next 2 years. One time, you tried to put one near the back of the line and the other in front, and they both screamed the entire day. Historians still debate whether the infamous Camel Choir of Yazd was an intentional ceremony or just poor planning. You know the truth. Sometimes they just wail for their best friend. After the chaos, you sneak away for a brief moment of peace. Behind the brush tent, someone's carved a game board into the stone. A checkers-like pattern using dried apricots and olive pits. You play a few rounds alone, losing to yourself. Then you win. You still feel empty. Lunch is stale bread and a dab of goat cheese. You eat in silence while watching Farid and Hakan glare at each other from opposite ends of the supply line. Their camels, ironically, have stopped caring and now share a water bucket without drama. The afternoon heat builds until it feels like the sun is trying to press you into a pancake. One camel faints. You help lift it 4 people, a leather sling, and the promise of water. You whisper prayers into its ear, though you're not sure who's listening. Sometimes, the desert answers with silence. You ride for a while, just to stretch your legs. You perch awkwardly on Hura's saddle. Thighs burning, knees wobbling. Merchants pass you with arched brows. A few grooms walk beside their animals, too proud to ride, too sore not to want to. Your route cuts through low dunes marked with black rocks. old markers, possibly Saka era, possibly just convenient boulders. Someone says they were placed to ward off bandits. Someone else swears they're camel grave markers. No one agrees. As dusk falls, the caravan halts beside a shallow stream. Camels drop to their knees with relief. You untie loads, grunting as baskets of grain thud into the sand. The work is repetitive, brutal, and full of splinters. Farid approaches later, quiet. He hands you a chunk of honeycomb without meeting your eyes. You accept it. The silence between you says, "Truce until the next spit war." That night, you can't sleep. The moon's too bright. Your muscles ache. So you walk past the rows of resting camels, their breath steaming gently in the night air. You reach Tufan, who lifts his head. He doesn't spit. You sit beside him, watching stars blink between clouds of dust. Somewhere nearby, someone plays a reed flute. It's off-key and broken in places, but strangely calming. You close your eyes. For a moment, everything is still until Hura farts. Loudly, you laugh into your blanket and drift off like that. By morning, someone's brewed a pot of tea so strong it could probably reanimate a camel skeleton. You sip from a cracked clay cup, the bitter herbs scraping down your throat like honesty. You're half asleep, half dehydrated, and entirely unprepared for today's surprise. Ointment duty. The caravan's healer, an elderly man with fingernails dyed red from constant turmeric use, waves you over as though you owe him money. Hura's knees, he croaks again. You follow him past a trail of half-chewed thistles to the supply crate. He hands you a bundle of rags, a stone bowl filled with a lumpy gray paste, and a string of tiny bells that he insists are part of the process. You're not sure what kind of medicine involves bells and onion juice, but today you are not a groom. You are a spiritual vet tech with zero training and plenty of confidence. You kneel beside Hura and begin rubbing the ointment onto her swollen joints. She groans. The smell is overwhelming. Onion boiled with donkey grease, crushed pine bark, and what might be spoiled yogurt. You try not to breathe through your nose. "It's not personal," you whisper. "It's for your knees." She turns her head slightly and exhales directly into your face. Garlic breath. Always. Next comes the amulet tying. You loop a woven cord threaded with a blue bead and a fig stem around her neck. Muttering the half-remembered charm, "May your hooves not crack, your bladder not swell, and your rage not be taken out on me." The old healer insists it's traditional. Historians still argue whether such charms had religious weight or were just early insurance policies wrapped in string. While you're finishing the wrap, the young merchant's son appears again. "Are you blessing the camel?" You look up, blinking. "I'm praying she doesn't kick me again." He nods slowly and backs away. After treating Hura, you're assigned to hoof maintenance. This involves scraping dried mud from crevices, checking for cracks, and applying a special clay mixture that includes salt, date pulp, and crushed eggshells. According to Bahram, the egg must be from a left-handed chicken. You're pretty sure he made that up. But no one argues with Bahram after he once shaved a merchant's eyebrows off for using his water flask. Midday brings heat and silence. Most of the caravan hides under tents or behind carts. You wander over to the cooking fire, where one of the caravan cooks named Shula invites you to taste her boiled barley stew. It's bland enough to qualify as a moral lesson. She lowers her voice and leans in. "You didn't hear it from me, but Zainab has an extra batch of pickled lemons hidden under the spice cart." You raise your brows. "Pickled lemons are worth more than copper right now. I'll trade you a handful," Shula offers, "if you help me get more onion paste from the healer without triggering one of his speeches about the Song dynasty." "Done," you say, immediately. Later that day, your back aching and your hands red from scraping hooves. You slip behind the tents to fetch the paste, as expected. The healer tries to detour into a discussion of ancient Chinese route mapping methods, but you fake a coughing fit and escape. You hand over the paste, and Shula presses the pickled lemons into your palm. They're wrapped in cloth and still cold. You eat one behind the grain sacks, sharp, sour, and perfect. You return to grooming in the afternoon, but now with a small reward tucked inside your pouch. It's enough to keep you going through the next few hours, which involve untying a knot so tight you briefly consider just cutting the camel free and changing your name. A storm threatens the horizon, so the caravan leader decides to rest early. You help lay out mats for prayer, line the water bowls, and check the tension on every load strap. You find one sack leaking tiny seeds, someone packed it wrong. You patch the hole with wax cloth and a silent promise to teach that apprentice how knots actually work. As twilight falls, the clouds build like bruises across the sky. You curl under a cart, pulling a blanket to your chin. Around you, camels snort and shift in their sleep. The wind whistles low and tired. You watch two fireflies blink in and out of view above the fig tree near the edge of camp. Maybe they're spirits. Maybe they're just bugs. You like not knowing. A few hours later, thunder rolls in. You wake up to someone shaking your shoulder. She's limping. Bahram says, "You're up in a flash. Hurrah again." You find her standing awkwardly, one leg slightly raised, eyes wide and unblinking. You crouch and feel the tendon. It's warm. Could be strain. Could be something worse. You reach for your pouch and pull out the rest of the onion ointment. As you rub it in, Hura lets out a low, echoing groan that sounds almost like a word. You look up at her face, covered in sweat and moonlight. "I know," you whisper. "Me too." She leans her head gently against yours. You stay like that for a moment, just a girl and her camel, under a sky cracking with lightning. Morning comes, dressed in fog and regret. The thunderstorm didn't break the camp, but it sure twisted it. The fires are out, the air smells like damp wool, and someone's tent is halfway up a tree. You squint through the mist and see a camel chewing on the fabric like it's the breakfast menu. Business as usual. Hura's still limping, so you take it slow with her. You rub a paste of almond oil and ground turmeric onto the joint, and whisper encouraging nonsense. Mostly compliments about her eyelashes and how good her farts sound in wide canyons. She doesn't look convinced, but she lets you work. While most of the grooms are dealing with soaked saddles, you're tasked with unloading some of the heavier packs for redistribution. This is how you end up wedged between a crate of brass pots and a shipment of perfume oil meant for a noblewoman in Kashgar. The crate leaks. You smell like rose hips and camel feet. Somewhere out there is a poet who could make that romantic. You are not that poet. Around mid-morning, you're summoned for a more delicate task. The caravan leader's cousin, who is traveling with the group for reasons nobody fully understands, has asked for your help. Not with camels, with love. You are handed a pouch of dried apricots, a length of embroidered cloth, and a small wooden figurine shaped like a goat. Apparently, he wants to court a recently widowed spice merchant who's traveling 3 wagons up. He thinks you, the camel groom, are the right person to deliver the gift because you have a trustworthy face. You try to refuse. He insists, loudly. People stare. You trudge to the spice cart, holding the bundle like a cursed scroll. The widow greets you with one raised brow and both arms crossed. You present the items. She opens the pouch, sniffs the apricots, snorts at the goat, then says, "Tell him I like pepper, not goats." You nod, bow, and back away with the speed of a man escaping a snake pit. On your way back, Bahram grabs your arm. Romantic delivery boy now. Don't. He just laughs. Later, during a brief water break, you overhear someone say the widow has 5 suitors and a secret stash of saffron. This is what passes for gossip out here, mild spice speculation, and which groom's beard is suspiciously well maintained. After lunch, barley again, you help repair a broken pack harness. A donkey had chewed halfway through the strap, possibly mistaking it for a rival. You braid fresh camel hair into a new cord, tie it 3 ways, and smear it with resin. It holds, for now. Then, as the caravan begins to move, another distraction. A young camel refuses to walk, not lie down, not run away, just refuses. Stands still, stares at the horizon like it's trying to remember where it left its soul. You've seen this before. Camels don't panic. They don't freeze out of fear. They just veto reality. You wave a hand in front of its face. Nothing. You tap its shoulder. Nothing. You even try the fake walking away with the herd trick. It blinks once. Fine. You call over 2 other grooms, and together you perform the dreaded rope of shame, a loop, gently tied around the back legs and pulled in time with a soft chant. It doesn't hurt. It's just humiliating for everyone. The camel eventually huffs and lurches forward like a reluctant god returning to earth. Victory. The rest of the day is uneventful, minus a short detour due to a collapsed sand dune and the part where a merchant's parrot escaped and spent 30 minutes flying in circles above the camels yelling, "Faster, faster." Historians still argue whether exotic animals like parrots were common on Silk Road caravans or rare eccentricities. You suspect the answer is whoever paid for it probably regretted it. Night falls. Again, you're sitting near the fire, sipping watered-down wine from a copper cup. When the cousin appears, he sits beside you, silent. She said she likes pepper. You offer, gently. He nods slowly. I don't have pepper. There's a pause. Then you reach into your pouch and pull out a single, precious pinch of black peppercorns you'd been saving to trade. Here. He stares. I was going to use it on goat stew. You shrug. This is more entertaining. He beams, then hugs you. It's awkward. After he leaves, Bahram slides into the spot beside you. Did you just buy yourself into their wedding? No. I bought my way out of hearing about it for the next 10 days. He raises his cup in silent respect. You fall asleep that night, listening to the crackle of firewood and a camel sneezing. You dream of being somewhere else, somewhere that smells less like pickled onions and more like pine trees. But even in the dream, you're brushing a camel's tail. Some fates follow you. You wake to the sound of someone gagging on sand. It's not you this time. One of the younger grooms, Safi, barely old enough to grow a full beard, slept with his mouth open and now sounds like he's coughing up a handful of stale lentils. You roll over, brush grit from your eyebrows, and sit up into a sunrise that's already too bright for polite conversation. Today is travel day, which means early packing, limited breakfast, and the constant looming threat of some minor disaster that will somehow be your fault. You haul yourself to the camels. Hura's already awake, chewing a vine she definitely shouldn't have access to. Tufan has somehow tied his lead around another camel's leg in a knot that might qualify as a crime in 3 provinces. The sun glints off the horizon like a blade. You sigh. Time to work. You adjust straps, tighten saddle lines, and patch a rip in a saddlecloth with thread made from flax and half a prayer. Once everything's ready, you fall in line with the rest of the handlers as the caravan creaks into motion like a great, slow beast made of dozens of smaller, grumpier beasts. The sand shifts beneath your feet with every step, fine as sifted flour and twice as determined to get inside your shoes. You march beside the camels, checking hooves, brushing burrs from coats, and occasionally redirecting heads away from tempting roadside weeds. Around midday, the real wind starts. It kicks up from the southeast, carving sharp angles into the dunes, and carrying with it the kind of dust that tastes like old coins. You pull your scarf higher over your nose. Some of the newer travelers start coughing. A few of the camels bleat nervously. Then the sandstorm hits. Not a monstrous one, but enough to sting the skin and make every breath an argument. Visibility drops. Camels turn their heads to shield their eyes. You help lead them to a cluster of rocks for cover. You grab Tufan's halter, pulling him gently but firmly while his feet drag like you're asking him to walk into a furnace. Hura follows, head low, as if she's done this dance before. Once everyone's secured, you squat beside a wagon and breathe through your scarf. Grit lines your tongue. Your ears itch. You're pretty sure there's sand in your eyebrows. Again, you close your eyes, trying to imagine something soft, a forest, maybe, or a bath, or a world without sand. First storm. Someone asks nearby. You glance sideways. It's a trader from Samarkand. Tall, missing 2 fingers, and wearing an earring made from a fossilized beetle. First one this week. You reply. He nods. Once saw a man eat sand to impress a girl. Did it work? No. The wind starts to die. An hour later, the storm is over. Everything is coated in dust, including the tea leaves, which, naturally, someone still brews into tea. You drink it anyway. The crunch adds texture. Later that evening, as the caravan resumes movement, someone starts telling stories around the walking line. There's one about a caravan that vanished 60 camels, 20 people, gone in a single storm. Nothing left but one sandal, found 3 weeks later in a riverbed. Some say they got lost in a sand maze. Others think they angered a spirit by mocking an old shrine. There's even a theory involving cursed sesame oil. Historians still argue whether such disappearances were mythologized accidents or intentional vanishing acts, smugglers, perhaps, or secret routes leading to black markets. You don't know. You just hope the wind doesn't do that tonight. You finally stop just before nightfall, your throat raw, legs aching, everyone's quiet, too tired for jokes. You unpack Hura, stroke her neck. She hums low, content. Tufan steps on your foot again. You don't have the energy to retaliate. Dinner is sparse, hard bread, dried figs, a smear of date paste. You eat it in silence while staring at the fire, which flickers like it's trying not to collapse under the weight of the day. You find your blanket, curl up beside a low stone outcrop, and try to sleep. But the wind keeps whispering, not loudly but persistently, like it knows something you don't, like it's trying to tell you the truth in a language you've almost forgotten. You drift in and out. A dream comes. You're in the storm again. But this time, the camels speak. Hura says your saddle straps are sloppy. Tufan demands more apricots. One of the merchants turns into a parrot. You wake with a jolt. Everything's quiet. A camel sneezes. You close your eyes again, mutter a sleepy curse, and surrender to the dust. You wake up with sand in your ears and garlic breath that isn't even yours. Tufan is curled suspiciously close, chewing what looks like a smuggled glove. You sigh again. You sit up, stretch, and immediately regret it as every vertebra reminds you that you slept on a rock, possibly 3. Today starts like any other, with mild chaos and a side of forbidden herbs. By mid-morning, something is off. You notice it. When one of the cooks, Shula, glances at you too quickly and then looks away, a merchant with too many rings keeps coughing like he's hiding something behind his sleeve. You feel it. Something is brewing. You follow your instinct well, and your nose, and find the source behind the water wagon. Garlic. Roasted. Hidden. Illegal. Emperor Wu's decree had made garlic contraband in some regions of the Silk Road, under the claim that it clouds the spirit and offends heaven, particularly in imperial territories where diplomacy and appearances mattered more than digestion. Garlic was to be eaten in secret, if at all. You squat beside a tent flap and watch Shula digging a shallow pit behind the cook fire. She's got cloves wrapped in fig leaves, tucked under coals, and she's whispering to the pot like it owes her money, planning a royal offense. You ask, deadpan. She jumps. You offer your hand. Relax, I'll help hide it. She hesitates, then grins. You get the good stuff. If you help me move the basket. Turns out, she's been running a side hustle. Garlic, onions, and something labeled as pepper but might just be dried beetle legs, all stored under camel blankets in the least likely to be inspected cargo, the dung carts. Brilliant. Disgusting. Effective. You carry a sack across the courtyard, trying not to gag from the combined scent of spices and ammonia. A few camels eye you suspiciously. One sneezes. You pretend this is normal. Historians still debate whether these small, banned food black markets represented rebellion, necessity, or just good seasoning. You figure it's all 3. Back at camp, a new groom is writing fake documentation for the cargo list. His ink is suspiciously thin. Turns out he's been stretching it with camel milk. You sigh. That's going to smear? He shrugs. It looks official. Nobody reads the second page anyway. You nod. Just misspell something in Latin. Makes it seem real. During lunch, Shula rewards you with roasted garlic wrapped in flatbread. It's the most flavor you've had in weeks. You tear into it like a condemned man. That's illegal, Bahram says, chewing jerky nearby. So's forging travel permits. He raises a cup in your honor. That afternoon, the caravan stops by a border outpost. The local guards are half asleep, but they check documents with exaggerated seriousness. You keep your head down, trying to look boring. Bahram distracts one of them by loudly claiming he once saw a camel predict a solar eclipse. You hold your breath as the guard inspects a cargo list you helped rewrite. Medicinal clay and ornamental salt. He reads, "What kind of salt?" You blink. "Holy salt." He frowns. "For what use?" "To keep demons from interfering with spice prices." You say, "Flat tone." No blink. He stares at you for a moment, then nods, as if that makes perfect sense. You pass. That night, there's a low celebration. Someone bartered for dried apricots and sweet wine. They share. You sit around the fire with a few other grooms, listening to one of the merchants tell a story about a haunted mountain pass where camels disappear and return. Different. Different how? Safi asks, more polite. The merchant says, everyone laughs, but not too hard. Just enough to shake off the memory of forged scrolls and fermented onions. You stare into the fire, letting your limbs go slack. Your mind wanders. Once, years ago, you dreamed of being more, maybe a merchant, a scribe, even a soldier. But grooming camels had its own rhythm. A kind of rough poetry, a calloused humility. You were needed, trusted, spat on, but also appreciated. You lean back, listening to the fire pop, and feel a strange warmth in your chest. It might be pride, or it might be the garlic. Hard to tell. You wake to the sound of bells being buried. Not metaphorically, actually buried. It's still dark the hour before dawn, when even the wind seems unsure of itself. You shuffle out of your blanket and follow the faint clinking sounds toward the edge of camp. There, in a shallow pit, Bahram is kneeling with a pouch of old camel hoof bells around him. 4 other grooms form a loose circle, watching. You join quietly. No one speaks. The bells are dented, rusted, worn smooth by years of walking. One by one, Bahram places them in the pit, murmuring something in a language you only half understand. A prayer, a release, or maybe just a habit. When the last bell is lowered, he scatters ash and crushed fig leaves over them. Then the sand goes back in, patted down like you'd smooth a bed for someone you respect. No one claps. No one smiles. This is old tradition. No written record. Just something passed between grooms since caravans first creaked into deserts. Retired bells should not ring again, they say, or the dead might follow the sound. Historians still argue whether the ritual originated with animist beliefs, desert folklore, or just a practical method for not reusing noisy gear. But you've seen grooms slap a bell out of a child's hand before they even hear the jingle. Whatever the source, the fear is real. Later, while brushing Tufan's coat, you find a tiny bell tangled in his tail. Not one of yours. It's older, thinner, with a high-pitched ring that makes your skin prickle. You drop it immediately. You bury that one too, just to be sure. The rest of the day is long and hot, made worse by a sudden incident involving one of the merchant's prized textiles and an over-enthusiastic camel sneeze. The fabric now bears an unfortunate spray pattern that some mistake for an innovative floral motif. You are not so lucky. You help rewrap the cargo, trying not to laugh as the merchant holds up the now slimy cloth with a look of existential despair. It was dyed with pomegranate blossoms, he murmurs. Now it's organic. You offer. He does not appreciate your wit. Around midday, a shaman traveling with a smaller caravan joins your camp. She's wrapped in thick layers despite the heat. Her hands stained purple from something herbal and aggressive. She offers talismans in exchange for dried cheese. You trade a slice the size of your thumb for a charm shaped like a hoofprint in obsidian. For protection against travel curses, she says. From who? She only smiles. You wear it anyway. That evening, the caravan pauses near a half-destroyed stone structure, a rest stop from older times. Roof long gone, one wall leaning like it's asking permission to collapse. You find a shaded spot against the outer wall and begin unbuckling Hura's saddle. She groans, not in pain, more in protest. You know that sound. She wants water before unpacking. You shake your head. We've been over this. Saddle first. She shifts her weight, tail twitching. You stare her down. She sneezes. Fine. Water first. Camels win most arguments. While she drinks, you walk past the ruin. Carved into the stone are faded symbols, merchant names, prayer markings, maybe the record of a lost caravan. One looks like a sun, another like a pair of wings. You trace them with your fingers. They're shallow, worn smooth, forgotten. You find a chunk of old hoofbell metal wedged in a crevice, another fragment of a story no one remembers. You pocket it anyway. Night falls quiet. Around the fire, the youngest groom, Safi, asks what happens if a groom dies on the road. No one answers for a while. Then Bahram says, without looking up, we burn their saddle, and we bury the bells. Safi nods slowly, biting his lip. You reach into your pouch and hand him a piece of sweet dried melon. Eat that instead of worrying. Thanks. You lie back later, staring at stars like pockmarks in the sky. You wonder how many other grooms have laid here, thinking the same thing. Tomorrow, you'll be in the mountains. The climb begins. You roll onto your side and hear the faintest bell chime. Just the wind. You hope you've heard of rocky roads. But this is personal. The climb into the lower slopes of the Tian Shan begins at dawn. And within the first 30 minutes, your left boot slips off 3 times. Tufan has attempted to bite 2 other camels, and one of the carts loses a wheel. Not breaks, loses. It rolls down the slope, hits a boulder, and shatters like a ceramic plate at a wedding no one wanted to attend. You're assigned to lead a smaller group of camels up a switchback trail littered with loose shale, shallow snow patches, and the occasional suspiciously aggressive goat. Hura trudges forward like a tired general. Tufan sulks, tugging sideways on his lead rope like he's trying to carve his own path through the cliffside. The wind is sharper up here. It tastes like pine, copper, and dry panic. By mid-morning, your nose is running, your fingers are stiff, and you're fairly certain you've pulled something in your lower back that will never quite go back into place. You pause to check a camel's hoof, just a routine glance, but what you find makes your stomach clench. Fleas. Not just 1 or 2, a patch. Nestled under the fur at the ankle joint, you groan. Fleas are a quarantine issue. A small outbreak and suddenly you're looking at fines, delays, inspection, and if the guards feel especially dramatic, forced fumigation. You gather a handful of crushed fig leaves and salt, then smear them into the fur with a little oil. It won't cure anything, but it'll mask the symptoms long enough for you to fake clean papers. You just need to make it to the next checkpoint. You keep walking, now eyeing every camel like it might be hiding a secret. Tufan starts scratching his side against a tree. Suspicious. You swat his flank and glare. He glares back. You say anything, I swear. He spits right on your sleeve. You've earned it. Later, you meet up with the lead scribe, who's organizing the cargo records. You review your camel list together. When he isn't looking, you nudge the ink pot slightly, and it tips just enough to smudge 2 pages. Oops. Looks like some water damage. You say quickly. He groans. Again? That's the 3rd time this week. You offer to recopy the names yourself. He agrees. You add 3 extra lines about camel health, all reading. No signs of infestation, hooves intact, temper excellent. You don't even feel guilty. It's called preventative storytelling. Historians still argue whether Silk Road record-keeping was meticulous bureaucracy or a patchwork of whoever had ink, good handwriting, and plausible deniability. You're living proof. It was mostly the last one. By dusk, the trail flattens out a bit. You camp near a cold spring that bubbles up through rock. One camel immediately tries to poop in it. You sprint. Crisis narrowly avoided. Dinner is thin soup, barely flavored. With a piece of fig bark floating in it for aroma, you chew a piece of stale bread while scratching your arm and praying it's just dry skin. Nearby, a merchant is trying to smooth-talk a guard into waiving a toll fee by offering him early access to apricot futures. You're not sure what that means, but the guard looks impressed. You return to your pack and begin the lice check ritual. One by one, you inspect tails, ears, and neck creases. You find 2 more infected spots. You sigh again. It's a big day for sighing. Safi helps you crush herbs and press them into paste. What happens if they catch us? He asks. You shrug. We tell them it was from another caravan. Blame the goats. He looks at the goats. They look back, suspiciously clean. It'll work. You lie. That night, the wind howls through the rocks like it's looking for something it lost. You huddle under 2 blankets and clutch your pouch of forged documents like a pillow. Tufan curls nearby, farting once, loudly, into the silence. You mutter a tired curse and drift off. You dream of a marketplace made entirely of flea combs. A man with 6 fingers offers you a job as a lice inspector. You wake sweating. By the time you reach the higher pass, your eyebrows have frozen. Not metaphorically, literally frozen. Tiny white ice crystals cling to the edges like your face is trying to grow its own frost veil. You wipe them away with a stiff glove, but they just form again. The cold doesn't bite. It gnaws. Even the camels look miserable. Their breath fogs thickly in the mountain air, rising in plumes like chimney smoke. Hura's fur has crusted with frost around the nostrils, and Tufan keeps exhaling loudly like he's offended that winter still exists. The rest of the herd trudges behind you, hooves crunching on the hard-packed trail as the snow deepens. You reach a narrow ridge. Below, the valley yawns open like the earth forgot to sew its coat. The wind is relentless. It pushes sideways, prying at your robes, trying to shove you off the trail just for fun. Then it happens. The moment every caravan dreads, a scream from the rear. You whip around. A mule has slipped. Its leg is caught between two stones, and the merchant leading it is yelling for help. You and Bahram race down the line, dodging frightened camels and flapping tarps. The animals panicked, wide-eyed, and the crate it was carrying pottery has already exploded across the snow. You don't hesitate. You kneel beside the mule and press your hands to its trembling side. Bahram pries the stones apart while you untie the harness, muttering curses under your breath about fate and gravity. Eventually, the leg comes free. It's not broken, but it's bruised badly. You use your sash to wrap it tight, binding with every ounce of steadiness your frozen fingers can manage. The merchant is useless. Will it walk? He asks, his teeth chattering. No, you say, but you still can. Take the load and go. He hesitates, then obeys. Later, over a pitiful fire lit with yak dung and flint, you warm your hands while trying to thaw the feeling back into your knees. One of the guards asks why you even bother. Just let the weak ones fall. He says, you say nothing, but the look you give him speaks volumes. Somewhere above, a hawk cries into the thinning sky. That night, you all camp at a narrow ledge half ice, half stubbornness. The tents barely hold shape. The camels bunch together in a huddle, forming a living windbreak. You sleep curled between Tufan and Hura, your arms wrapped around a canvas pack for insulation and dignity. Sometime in the night, you wake to someone whispering, not in fear, in prayer, a soft chant. Low, rhythmic, melodic in the way worn wheels hum on a well-used axles. It's one of the Kirghiz traders, an older man with wind-chapped skin singing softly to his camel. The animal is old, trembling slightly, its knees folded but restless. He sings anyway, a cradle song, a goodbye. You look away. When morning breaks, the camel doesn't rise. They bury it beneath the snow, pressing the white down in silence. You tie one of its bells to a tree branch, high and a shaking in the wind, where it rings faintly for the rest of the morning. Historians still argue whether mountain pass rituals like this were part of any formal religion or simply born of grief. Either way, they feel sacred when you're there. The descent begins just after midday. Your legs burn. The camels stumble. Every turn of the trail feels like it's trying to pitch you into the abyss. At one point, Tufan slips on a patch of ice, and you catch him, barely pulling him upright by the strap across his neck. He stares at you afterward like you've betrayed his plan to lie down and give up. Not today, you mutter. By the time you reach the next plateau, the air thins enough that you can breathe without your lungs protesting. The snow gives way to rocky gravel, then dry grass tufts. The sky looks wider again, and just before camp, a miracle. A hot spring. The traders yell, camels grunt. Someone strips to their underwear in less than a minute and plunges in with a scream so loud it echoes off the cliffs. You just soak your hands and feet, watching steam rise like a ghost from your skin. You look up at the sky, still pale from cold, and whisper a thanks to no one in particular for getting through it. That night, you sleep on grass instead of ice. Tufan curls beside you again, warm for once. Hura's already snoring. You close your eyes and dream of home. Not a house, but a night like this, soft ground. No bells, no ice, no forms to forge, just breath and sky. The air smells different now. You've left the mountains behind, and the trail winds into low scrubland, golden under a wide blue sky. The wind here carries dust and sweet rot overripe fruit, broken herbs, and sometimes, if the breeze is just right, the lingering hint of firewood smoke from villages far off the main path. The camels walk more freely here. Even Tufan stops dragging his feet and occasionally hums to himself, that deep, gurgling grunt that only means one thing: boredom. Which is dangerous, because boredom in camels leads to accidents and accidents. In this job, often involve spit. You call a halt around midday near a dry riverbed where a few stubborn trees still grow. While the camels drink and roll in the dust, you walk with a few other grooms to the site of a recent wreck. The old caravan was caught in a storm maybe 2 weeks ago. Half a cart remains, shattered under a drift of sand and dry grass. A broken wheel lies nearby, and something glints beneath it. You dig gently, brushing back the earth with your sleeves. Bone, not human, not camel, thin, carved. It's a flute. Old, weathered, still stained with reddish dye near the mouthpiece. Someone picks it up and blows. The sound is eerie, high-pitched and hollow, like a scream too old to matter. A few camels look up. Safi calls it ghost music. You believe it? Later, a debate breaks out. It's an instrument. Someone says, no, says Bahram. It's a memorial. They wouldn't carve music from bones. Why not? It's poetic. Poetic doesn't get you through customs. You let them argue. Historians still argue the same thing, whether bone flutes found along the Silk Road were meant for ritual or simply the byproduct of someone needing a tune on a long walk. You carry the flute for a while, tucked in your sash, unsure why. It just feels wrong to leave it there. By the time the sun begins to dip, the caravan halts again near a cluster of standing stones. They're old. No one knows who placed them. 6 in a circle, 1 in the center. Faded carvings you can't read. Someone says they're burial markers. Someone else swears they mark a boundary between the merchant lands and the shepherd's hunting territory. You don't ask too many questions. You tie Hura near the stones, careful not to let her knock one over with her tail. At dinner, the conversation turns to the lost caravan again. One merchant claims he heard they were smuggling silk dyed with beetle blood worth more than gold. Another says the lighter tried to cheat a Sogdian priest and was cursed. You listen in silence, still holding the flute. After dinner, you walk a little ways from camp and sit on a rock under the stars. You lift the flute and play one long, shaky note. It echoes once, then fades. A moment later, the wind rises not strong, but definite, and rustles the grasses around the standing stones. You don't believe in omens, but you still put the flute down and walk back without looking behind you. The next morning, a guard finds you and says you're wanted at the front. You arrive to find the caravan master holding a letter. You wrote this. He hands you a folded page, one of your earlier forged documents. You scan it quickly. Everything looks fine except the date? Wrong year. You hold your breath. It's fine, the master mutters. We'll correct it. But you need to be more careful. You nod. Close call. Later that day, Tufan trips on a loose stone and nearly face plants into a fig cart. Hura spits at a pigeon. One of the goats climbs a tree. Somehow, chaos returns, as it always does. But you still feel something different, like the wind is watching you. That night, as you drift to sleep, you hear someone, Safi, maybe whispering a song he half remembers, a lullaby from his mother. The melody is familiar. You hum along softly. Then you reach into your pouch and quietly bury the flute, just in case. By the time you reach the next caravanserai, everyone is a little too tired, a little too hungry, and entirely too close to losing their tempers over chickpeas. It's a squat, sun-battered outpost on the edge of a dried river, half crumbled and crawling with tiny lizards that stare at you like judgmental ancestors. You guide your camels into the inner courtyard and begin the routine. Unpack, brush, water, inspect hooves, check for infections, and, most importantly, make sure no one's stolen your best feed bag. Someone always tries. You find it 2 stalls down, hanging from a post beside a camel that definitely isn't yours. You untie it quietly, and the camel gives you a look like, I knew it wasn't mine, but I'm not the one who tied it there, so technically this isn't my fault. Fair enough. Just as you finish laying out the feed, a commotion breaks out in the main hall. Raised voices, footsteps, then a crash. You drop the saddle rag and head inside. 2 grooms are locked in a brawl. Farid and Hakan again, the eternal rivals this time over stolen firewood. Apparently, someone took a bundle meant for cooking and used it to heat bathwater. A small act of luxury that sparked a large active fist. You step in, grab Farid by the collar, and Bahram does the same to Hakan. After a few shouts and one slipper thrown with remarkable aim, the fight settles into muttered curses and bruised pride. The cook, Shula, arrives last with a pot of boiling chickpeas. "If anyone touches my firewood again," she says flatly, "I will feed you to the camels." Slowly, they believe her. You help clean up the mess and are rewarded with a small bowl of warm chickpeas seasoned with cumin and salt. The flavor is rich, earthy, and way too good to be served after a fist fight. You eat in peace, watching the sun begin to dip behind the outer wall. Later that evening, you hear a familiar, strained voice from the corner. "Remember the bell burial?" Bahram asks. You nod, sipping watered wine. "Found another one today, not ours. Old, still tied to a rope." He holds it up, a thin brass bell with cracked edges and a single faded inscription you can't read. He turns it over. Inside, a bit of black hair is still knotted around the clapper. He doesn't bury this one. Instead, he tosses it into the brazier. It hisses, flares briefly, then sinks into the coals with a soft metallic sigh. "That one felt wrong," he says. "You don't ask. Not every bell deserves to be buried." That night, a group of pilgrims arrives, late travelers from the western reaches, wrapped in layered robes and trailing the scent of road dust and peppermint oil. They bring warnings of sickness spreading through lowland towns, not plague. One of them insists, "Just the wind turned foul, took 2 camels and a boy with it." You glance at your own herd and feel an old chill crawl back up your spine. Next morning, everyone moves slower. You wake to find 2 guards lighting bundles of herbs beneath the camel's sage, wormwood, and dried peppermint. The smoke curls around their legs and rises into their underbellies like a protective ghost. One camel sneezes, another groans like you just interrupted its nap. You light a bundle yourself and fan it toward Hura. She rolls her eyes. Tufan tries to eat his. Safi mutters, "It smells like tea gone bad. It smells like not dying." You say, historians still argue whether these smoke rituals were spiritual or medical. You suspect it was both, a way to cleanse, to ward off invisible things, and perhaps to feel like you were doing something when everything else felt out of control. You breathe the smoke deep and hope it works. You spend most of that day checking camels for fever. One has a warm nose but seems fine otherwise. Another has been coughing for weeks, just dust, probably. But you slip it a second handful of barley just in case. By evening, the pilgrims are gone, and the courtyard is quiet again. You sit near the wall, sketching shapes in the dirt. A circle, a spiral, a hoof print. Bahram joins you and says nothing for a long time. Then he asks, "You ever think about leaving?" You nod. "Where would you go?" You shrug. "Where the camels aren't." He chuckles. "That's nowhere." You both stare at the fire. A wind picks up, cool, dry, harmless. But it makes the brazier flame bend slightly toward the north. And just for a moment, it smells like peppermint. You wake to rain. Not the kind that softens the world. This is bitter desert drizzle, thin, indecisive, and cold enough to annoy everyone without actually solving the dust problem. Camels hate it. You hate it. Even the lizards seem offended. You pull your robe tighter, grab your brush, and start grooming anyway. Hura has pressed herself dramatically against the wall like she's auditioning for a tragedy. Tufan has flattened his ears and is staring at the sky as if blaming you personally for the weather. The caravan doesn't move today. Too muddy. Instead, you're assigned quarantine duty. A camel near the northern pens has been coughing. A deep, wet cough that doesn't sound like the usual dust clog. The caravan master's face was serious this morning. No jokes, no grumbles, just one firm instruction. Smoke them, separate them, and track every nose. You trudge to the northern paddock and find the sick camel lying down. Her eyes are glassy. Her breath is slow. You sit beside her for a while, not touching, just watching. The earth smells of wet straw and something faintly sour. You whisper to her, not a prayer, not a spell, just your voice moving through the air, like a hand across her back. The herbalist appears later with a sack of dried roots, crushed petals, and something that looks like powdered fish scale. You help her mix it into bundles, which are then burned in iron bowls placed beneath each animal's chest. The smoke curls up, bitter and strange, and you fight the urge to cough. "You okay?" Safi asks quietly. You nod. Even if you weren't, you wouldn't say, "In the afternoon." You help scrub feeding bowls with ash and sand. You check water skins for leaks. You sweep droppings with a handmade broom that falls apart as you use it. You tie it back together with twine. You keep going. Someone sneezes. You try not to look. The merchant from 3 wagons down asks if camels can carry contagion in their fur. You say no. He doesn't believe you, but walks away anyway. Later, a rider appears, a lone figure on a donkey, soaked to the bones, wrapped in 3 cloaks and trailing the stink of panic. He brings word of a village 5 days behind. Coughing, fevers, burials. He says travelers are being turned back at checkpoints. Entire caravans rerouted. Some quarantined for weeks. You feel it ripple through camp tension. Fear. Calculation. Merchants weighing delay against profit. Guards whispering about masks made of soaked cloth. Grooms checking their camel's breath 3 times instead of once. You light more peppermint bundles that night. 1 for each animal. 1 for yourself. Smoke dances in the rain. And then, unexpectedly, you're called to the main tent. The caravan master is seated, unwrapped, face drawn. We need someone to take 2 camels to the forward station at the junction, deliver the cargo, and ask about rerouting. We need new maps, new word. You stare. You mean, go alone. He nods. You trust me. A pause. No. But you know the camels better than anyone. Fair. You accept. The next morning, you leave before dawn. Just you. 2 camels, Hurrah, and Tufan. Of course, and 3 bundles of high-priority goods wrapped in silk, spices, sealed letters, and a small crate of herbs that Shula swore might help if the lungs tighten. You ride light, cutting across dried riverbeds and narrow goat trails. Hurrah sets the pace. Tufan drags behind, but at least he doesn't complain much. The world narrows. Just you, hoofbeats, wind. At night, you sleep with your head on the spice crate. It smells like cinnamon, cloves, and fear. You pass one abandoned outpost, a roofless stone hut where someone carved tally marks into the doorway. 47. You don't ask. The junction station appears on the 3rd morning, rising out of the landscape like it was planted there by mistake. 2 tents, 1 tower, 3 guards. You deliver the goods. You ask your questions. They say the road west is closed. The river crossing is under watch. There's talk of an alternative route through the cliffs longer. Riskier, but open. They hand you new maps, ink still wet. You ask if there's been more sickness. One of the guards shrugs. Not here, yet. You ride back in silence. You return to camp just before nightfall. Everyone gathers to hear the news. As you hand the caravan master the maps, he claps your shoulder. Good work. Bahram passes you a warm flatbread. You sit, eat, rest. The sick camel. She's standing again, still coughing, but standing. That night, Tufan lies closer than usual. You don't ask why, you just sleep. And for once, the wind doesn't smell like fear. You're not supposed to feel sentimental about the end of a route. It's just another stop, another repacking, another set of scrolls to sign and carts to load. But this time, it feels different. The air is softer. The wind tastes like olives and iron. And the camels even Tufan walk with a kind of slowness that isn't fatigue. It's awareness. They know the last trade post of this journey rises ahead, brick-walled, sun-washed, and humming with life. Merchants, grooms, buyers, brokers, children chasing chickens, and guards polishing their spears in performative silence. It's loud, bustling, and smells like sweat, cumin, perfume, and animal musk. In other words, home. You guide Hurrah into the courtyard with her nose held high, as if she personally negotiated the silk trade treaty between 3 kingdoms. Tufan follows, glancing side to side like he's casing the place for snacks. The unloading begins. You've done this so many times that it's muscle memory now. Untie the cord, lower the crate, shift the frame, check the straps, rub the bald patch on the hump. But something in your hands hesitates. These are the final lifts, the last brush down. You'll be handing them off tomorrow. Hurrah groans softly as you sponge her legs. You lean your head into her side. I know, you whisper. Me too. The merchant whose goods you carried approaches with a bright silk sash. For your service, he says. And for the one who spat only twice, he's talking about Tufan. Obviously, you smirk. Take the sash and nod with a tired kind of gratitude. Around you, everything is moving. New camels arriving, older ones being weighed and tagged for their next route. Some are sold, some stay, some vanish into side markets with price tags and no names. You hold the sash for a long time before tying it to Hura's harness. It doesn't match anything. That's the point. That evening, you meet the buyer, a tall man from the eastern ports with sharp eyes and a quiet voice. He inspects Hura gently, checks her teeth, runs his hand down her flank. She's older than the manifest says, he remarks. You shrug. She's earned it. He smiles. I'll take her. He offers a fair price. Not generous, not cruel, just fair. You take it. Tufan, surprisingly, is also requested by a local brewer who wants to use him for grain runs. You try to picture Tufan cooperating with barley barrels and nearly laugh. You sell him too. You sign the papers. Watch the coins fall into your hand like cold water. Then you do something you've never done before. You say goodbye, not just with a pat or a muttered stay alive, but with words. You kneel beside Hura. Her eyes are soft, still wise, still slightly judgmental. Thanks for not killing me. You say, even when you could have. She exhales through her nose. You take that as understanding. You turn to Tufan. You were an ordeal, you mutter, but you kept going, even when I didn't want to. He blinks at you, then spits. You wipe your cheek and nod. Yeah, fair. The next morning, you pack your things. A comb, a rope, a worn-out saddle pad you don't remember stealing, and a pouch of crushed herbs you'll probably never use again. You walk once more through the courtyard, past carts, traders, camels you don't recognize. You nod to Bahram, who's already tying gear onto a new beast for a fresh route east. You staying? He asks. For a while. He claps your shoulder. Try not to get bored. You smile. I'll find someone to argue with, or spit on, or both. You both laugh. Then he's gone, walking back into the road. You stay behind. For once, you trade a polished hoof pick, your last real tool, for a pouch of sweet pomegranate seeds and a linen shirt that almost fits. You wander the market square, breathing in smells that don't belong to camels. You sit beneath an olive tree and feel, for the first time in years, unburdened. You don't know what comes next, and for the moment, that's fine. That night, as you lie in a real bed wooden frame, scratchy blanket, walls that don't flap in the wind, you hear a bell, faint, far off, just one small chime. High and soft. Maybe it's Hura. Maybe it's just your memory playing tricks on you. Either way, you smile and sleep. You stay in that trade town longer than expected. Days stretch, then weeks. You take odd jobs patching tack, translating bad maps, even teaching a few young grooms how to tell the difference between saddle sores and sand rash. You don't miss waking up in the dark to saddle 6 camels before breakfast, but you do miss the silence between dunes, the rhythm of hooves, the way the horizon used to follow you like a patient dog. You still visit the caravans. Every time a new one rolls into town, you find yourself drifting to the gates, not to greet anyone in particular, just to watch. See if the camels look well groomed, if the packs are aligned, if someone's tied the knots the way you once did with the loop tucked under. Not over. One day, a younger groom, barely 16, asks if you're recruiting. You shake your head. I retired. He looks surprised. But your boots still have caravan straps. You glance down. They do. You haven't noticed. Weeks pass. The seasons shift. You spend some evenings playing bones with the porters. Other nights, you sit by the outer wall, chewing dry melon and watching the lanterns flicker in the distant fields. The world feels wider now, not in a lonely way, just vast. Sometimes, you think about Tufan, whether he ever cooperated, whether someone ever trained him to carry barley without kicking the barrels over for fun. You like to think he didn't. You wonder if Hura's still walking, still remembering you, still spitting at people she doesn't trust. You never expected to grow old doing this, but here you are, older, quieter, a little heavier in the knees. Your hands ache more when it rains. You tie knots slower now. You no longer wake up with urgency, just with breath. One afternoon, you return to the caravanserai just to sit beneath the same olive tree where you unloaded Hura that last day. You sit there a long time, sipping watered wine from a cracked cup. Then you hear bells, not just one, a whole line. A new caravan rolls in dusty, wide, layered with spices and unfamiliar flags. You watch the grooms unclip the leads, unhitch the carts. One drops a crate, another laughs. The sound is familiar. Then one of them calls out. You glance over. It's Safi, older, taller, his voice deeper now. He sees you and beams. You're still alive. Barely. You say. He walks over, dusts off his robes. We just came from Kashgar. Route was awful. Tunnels collapsed. One of the camels wouldn't stop chewing its own rope. Sounds like Tufan had a nephew. You mutter. He laughs. You ever want back in? He asks. We're down one groom. Old one got married to a date merchant. Fell in love over crushed fruit. You look past him at the caravan, then at the road, then at your own hands. The scars are still there, but they don't sting. You shake your head. Not this time. He nods. Just had to ask. You watch him go. The bells fade into the background. That night, you light a fire outside town. No caravan, no camels, no crates. Just you, the stars. A few burning coals. You pull out an old bundle from your satchel, a piece of harness, a worn lead rope, and the smallest hoof bell. One you never sold or buried. You tie it to the firewood stack just once. For sound. It rings. Not loud, not sad. Just there. You sit back, close your eyes, and let the silence settle. Maybe tomorrow you'll finally leave the trade town. Maybe not. There's no rush. You're not being followed anymore, only remembered. The fire burns low now. The night stretches its fingers across the plains, soft and slow. The wind has quieted. The bells have stopped. You lie back against your rolled-up satchel, the canvas stiff but familiar, and let your breath slow to match the rhythm of the cooling earth. The air carries the faintest scent of dust, smoke, and the memory of wool somewhere far away. A camel groans in its sleep. Just one soft protest, like a dream slipping out the side of a worn mind. Your knees don't ache now. Not in the dark. Not in this quiet. You remember the sandstorms? The pepper smoke. The clinking bells tied with silk. And the stupid, stubborn camels that taught you patience. You remember trading apricots for trust, brushing knots from old fur, singing lullabies in languages you never wrote down. And you remember her? The one who never spat unless she meant it. You pull your blanket higher. The wind shifts again only slightly and carries with it the sound of a single bell. You know it's not real. You know it's in your memory. That's fine. It's allowed. You're allowed, so let it go now. Let the caravan keep walking without you. Let the dust settle. Let the bells stop. Let the sky close over the trail behind you. Let it all fade. Just for tonight. Just for now. Sleep.